Welcome, one and all, and welcome those of you watching us from your home or where you may be across the country. On behalf of the Hampshire Township Historical Society, we are very pleased to present one of our most interesting programs about the red-hot fires in Hampshire history. I'm Bonnie Engel, the president, and really thank you all for being here and for joining us. I would like to ask those of you who have served as firemen, fire rescue, for over 40 years, would you please stand?
I was 40 years.
You don't have to justify a bullet, you're okay.
And those of you who did fire rescue for 30 years or more, would you stand? And those of you who did fire rescue at all in your career or life, volunteer in other ways, thank you. Why don't we all stand and honor these men by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Bill Swalwell, our vice president, who has very graciously planned this evening and the program. Bill.
Thank you, Bonnie. I'm excited about this program. We last year kind of came up with the idea and the concept of the famous fires over Hampshire with the history that we've had. I discussed it briefly with Bonnie, and she said, take it and run with it. And that's when I reached out for both Trevor, Herrmann, and Bill Robinson, who graciously agreed to present this evening. So, looking very forward to it. They put a lot of time into this preparation. I've seen the presentation twice. It's very impressive, very comprehensive. Trevor harvested a lot of information off the internet and from the library and from the fire department. I think you will all be very impressed with the PowerPoint and the presentation and program tonight. So thank you all for coming. We have a wonderful turnout. A few things I'd like to just announce briefly that we have over at the table is, of course, our ongoing candy sales. They're there. Postcards that are historic, and we also are performing a drawing this evening. So when you see the paper clip or the clipboard come around with the sign-up sheets, please put your name, phone number, and email address on it. Of all things, we are raffling off 3 bottles of Fireball. We thought that would be fitting. So, by all means,
That's really good.
By all means, sign up for it. We're raffling it off. You can give it to family or friends. So, for what it's worth. Next, I guess that's what I wanted to cover. Other than the old-fashioned days, I mentioned that last month. This year, we are, because of the village's 150th anniversary, this is the reason, and that's what's driving this, we're having an old-fashioned day celebration, which is what the Village Festival used to be years ago. They've since changed the name and are doing a wonderful job with it. But in light of the 150th, we wanted to celebrate the village's history and bring back the old-fashioned day celebration. So in June, we are having a 3-day event. It's the 5th, 6th, and 7th. It's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We're having music performers all 3 days. There's going to be dinner on Friday night, music, children's activities, family activities on Saturday, and we're bringing back the water fights. We'll know in 3 days, but for sure it sounds like it's going to fly. So that'll take place on Sunday the 7th. So I encourage you all to come, attend, alumni, residents. It's going to be quite an event. So we all hope to see you there. It's going to be wonderful. So with that, I'd like to introduce our 2 presenters tonight. And how's that phrase go? Age before beauty. I'm gonna start with Bill Robinson. Now these dates and times may be wrong, and feel free to set me straight if I get them wrong. But I'm gonna do my best here.
I'm 52.
In the best case, I'm 40.
That makes me 30.
Right. Bill Robinson moved to Hampshire in approximately 1994. He was still working in the suburbs and was commuting east, and then ultimately came on to the Hampshire Fire Department in 1997. He served in multiple capacities with the Hampshire Fire Protection District and ultimately became the fire chief. He became chief in 2012 and did that position until 2020. total of 8 years in that capacity. An interesting point about both of these gentlemen's careers, I thought, is they were both promoted at the same time in 2012. This would be 14 years ago when Bill Robinson was promoted to the fire chief position, and Trevor was promoted to deputy chief. It was done almost at the same time. I thought that was kind of interesting. I'll move on to Trevor Herrmann, whose collective family service between his father and grandfather collectively have served over a century of fire service in the village of Hampshire. I just think that's amazing. Trevor himself started out as a firefighter. He has served as lieutenant, captain, the training officer, the deputy fire chief, and ultimately the fire chief. What a career, Trevor. I commend you on that. Over 36 years of combined service with the village of Hampshire, with the fire department. Fantastic job. What else did I have I wanted to cover? In his career, he has earned 3 distinguished awards highlighting his achievements throughout his service. He also served as a key member in the establishment and construction of Hampshire's 2nd Fire Department, 2nd Fire Station. With that, that's one point I do have to make. One thing you'll want to make sure that you articulate when you speak to Trevor, either afterwards or during the program, don't ever call it a fire barn. It's a fire station, and he will be sure to set you straight on it. With that, I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks.
This might be the only night that the majority of the people that are past firefighters would say it's a fire barn.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. That's true. Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us. Bill Swalwell and Bill Robinson and myself, we've been working on this for a few months, so I hope you enjoy it. The focus is really going to be on the Great Hampshire Fire, but we're going to talk a little bit about some fires that occurred before that, and then we're going to talk about how the fire department was established after the Great Hampshire Fire, and then we're going to talk about some fires that have occurred in the last 20, 30, 40 years. So that's kind of the goal tonight. So like many of you, as I was growing up and you listen to your parents and your grandparents' stories, you're kind of listening, and then later on in life you thought, oh God, I wish I would have wrote that down. I really regret a lot of those stories that I didn't write down, but I have thrown in a few stories tonight that I hope you enjoy, that I remember from my dad and my grandfather. As far as the Great Hampshire Fire, obviously I wasn't there. Bill was. He looks really good for 100. I joke because when the 3 of us met, he's like, "Now don't bring up that I was at the fire." I wouldn't do that to you. But anyways, a lot of the stories tonight come from the late Mayor Schmidt, Dan Gustafson, and the late Maynard Peterson. So in 2016, we had our 85th anniversary, so we actually had this anniversary book made. So there's a little story in here about the Great Hampshire Fire, which led into the establishment of the fire department. So we don't have any copies of this left, but obviously this year it's our 95th anniversary, and in 5 years it'll be our 100th anniversary. And I know for a fact there already is a committee working on the 100th anniversary book, because they actually called me the other day and were picking my brain a little bit. So that's something to look forward to in another 5 years. So with that being said, we're going to start with the program here. Go ahead and flip it. My eyes won't read that, so I'm going to have to read off of this. So the history of fires before 1929. And obviously before 1929, there wasn't a whole lot of photos of the fires during the fire or even after the fire. So there's not a whole lot of photos in the beginning of this, but as we go on, we'll get more and more photos. You'll see that. But there were numerous documented fires prior to the Great Hampshire Fire of 29. One of them was on August 17th of 1891. The town citizens used a hose cart to extinguish a fire at the August Hartrim residence. People sprung into action to save it, and we thought it was a goner. And that was actually right on the front page of the Hampshire Register newspaper. So that was that title came right off of that. I don't know where the August Hartrim residence was. Does anybody know that or where that was at? But it's kind of interesting to read a little bit about that article. The very next day, August 18th, 1891, again, the very next day, there was a historic fire to date in Hampshire, a very large fire at the Watrous and Company, which was a large store, and all the buildings around it were destroyed. Continuing, March 3rd, 1901, there was a large fire on State Street, and the hotel was saved, and we'll actually have a picture of the hotel here in just a couple minutes that I'll show you. September 26th of 1901, another fire on State Street in the business district. The headline in the Hampshire Register, "Better fire protection can't be brought soon enough." And then on April 8th, 1920, the headline in the Hampshire Register was, "Hampshire to have a new water system." The column stated, "Adequate water mains are needed. An election to take place to decide on a bond issue for $10,000 to install a 60,000-gallon tank behind the village hall." So if we go to the next slide there's actually a picture of the hotel that was saved. Now this hotel was where Randy Ross's place is, right in the corner of State and Rinn. But that's where that hotel was located at. The very next picture, this is in the early 1900s, so this is the village hall with that water tower behind the village hall. Kind of a cool picture. Continue with Hampshire Historic Fires. Again, December 18th, 1920, J.E. Grocery Store was destroyed. Many of the buildings around it were saved by using the hose cart. And then on November 26, 1928, which keep in mind, this is like 10 months before the Great Hampshire Fire now, a special election was held. The voters of the village passed a bond for $8,000 by a large majority to improve the water system for $5,000 and purchase a fire truck for $3,000. Now, we didn't have a fire department yet, but they're already in the process of buying a fire truck. A large majority of the $5,000 went to improve the water system by putting in a new water pump. And you'll see when we go into that Great Hampshire Fire what actually occurred that day. Down in 1921, the Charles Holcren Tailor Shop actually burned down, and that's actually was located where James Motor Showroom is on State Street downtown right now. So that's that building, but again, we don't have a picture of the fire. But again, that was destroyed in 1921. And then here's a picture, we're starting to get a little bit closer to the Great Hampshire Fire, but this is the picture of the downtown in the early 1900s, which if you note there, if you can see it real well, on the right-hand side, the post office was basically close to Jackson Avenue, and you're now looking north towards where Allen Road would be now. It's kind of interesting to see the incline on the street going up, isn't it? It's kind of really interesting to see that. But eventually, when the Great Hampshire Fire occurred, the post office was actually on the other side, farther down on the west side of the street. And then here we are getting real close, 1918. I just wanted you to see this, but these are all the buildings as they start to look as we get closer to the Great Hampshire Fire of 1929. Now this was actually on Armistice Day. They had a parade every year, so that's what they're actually doing. They're marching down State Street having a parade. All right, here's the Great Hampshire Fire. So on Sunday, September 15th, 1929, the population of Hampshire was 600. The fire started around noon in the Hampshire Market, which is Dry Millers. It was an electrical fire that actually started it. It was a very, very windy day. The town whistle was activated, and people thought it was a mistake because the whistle always blew at noon on weekdays, so they just got it confused and thought it was a mistake. There were very few people out because it was a Sunday, so the fire went undetected for a while. And the town hose cart was stored at the Kai's store and clothing, which I think I just talked to Oris, and he said he thought that was on State Street, so that's actually where it was stored at. The village water pump was actually broke at the time, so it was no good. There was no pressure, so the hose cart wouldn't work. A bucket brigade was used. They got the water from a cistern behind the village hall, and that's how they carried out the bucket brigade from there, and they had just formed a line passing those buckets and throwing it on the fires as best as they could. At the time of the fire, they had a couple guys go and try to fix the pumps during the fire, but they had no luck fixing it. A call for help was made to the Elgin Fire Department 4 different times, but they refused to come out. The Genoa and Sycamore Fire Departments responded, but it was way too late. Eventually, on the 5th request, Elgin did come out, but again, it was way too late. What was interesting is I actually read that Harvey Herrmann must have had a connection in Elgin. He actually made that 5th phone call to Elgin, and they said, okay, we're going to come out. But again, it was too late. So I thought that was kind of interesting to read that. A lot of people here, I'm sure, know Harvey Herrmann. The fire spread very rapidly, and the citizens began to save as much of the merchandise as they could by pulling it out of the stores and the buildings. They put it in the middle of the street, but the embers and the radiant heat ignited it. But some of it was salvaged with the bucket brigade itself. Now this next one is kind of interesting. Who would have thought in Hampshire? They started looting a lot of the merchandise. So they actually had to set up a security detail to protect it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. All of the buildings were destroyed in less than 2 hours. 9 businesses were actually destroyed. The value of that was over $50,000 in damage. Of course, there were no pictures of the fire itself, just the aftermath, which we're going to look at a couple pictures here. And that's because everyone went to help with the bucket brigade and moving merchandise. Now, you know, this day and age, they'd be out with their phones, taking pictures and videotaping, they wouldn't be helping. So that's kind of interesting to compare that and just think about that itself. So the businesses that were destroyed, and a lot of the people here will recognize a lot of these names. So these are the businesses that were destroyed on the west side of State Street. The Alex Reed Furniture Store, Hampshire Electrical Store, Hansler and Shatter's Restaurant, the Hampshire Market and the residence upstairs, the Ora Cook Barbershop, and the Hampshire Post Office and the residence upstairs. And then over on the east side, the businesses that were destroyed were Mrs. Henry Melm's Building, W.H. Kai's Men's Furnishings, George R. Fox and Sons Harness and Shoe Shop. And then the other buildings that were actually damaged, not destroyed but damaged, was Anderson Clothing, the Moore Oil Company, which we'll look at a picture of that here in a minute, the Hampshire Garage, Grant Melm's Farm Implements, Voight Hardware, Tony Kimball Grocery Store, and then numerous sheds in the alley, as well as the Kirchhoff Brothers Lumberyard. Now this is kind of interesting. So these are some quotes from people that were actually there. Herb Warrington, a lot of us recognize Herb Warrington. We got the mail out of the post office and it went out by train on schedule that night. Esther Samuelson, a lot of us remember her. I was coming out of the Methodist Church, which is now the Faithway Baptist, when we heard the alarm whistle. We went to see what was going on and then we found ourselves in a bucket brigade. Bill Ruth, I almost drowned. I was going to the basement at the Laval building and nearly fell into the cistern. Alex Reed stopped me just in time. Stella Channing, after Bill Scholler and Avery Baker, who were rural Americanos, got the mail out of the post office, Bernice Getzelman and I drove to Sycamore to get the postmaster, John Brill, off the golf course to tell him what was going on. Bill Woodmeyer, we lived above the post office and we were coming down the stairs when someone yelled, "The town is on fire." We were headed to Mother's for Sunday dinner. We rushed back upstairs to save what we could. And then Wendell Ralston, my first view of Hampshire was of it in flames. My future wife, Frances Fitzsimmons, was bringing me to Hampshire to meet her parents. As we turned the curve at Route 72 in New Lebanon, just at the top of the hill, we could see Hampshire up in smoke. So I thought that was really kind of interesting and cool to see those quotes from people who lived through it. So I blew these pictures up a little bit. So this is actually the picture of from the west shooting east to the east side of State Street. So there's the Moore Oil Company just to the left. And obviously this is right where Dry Millers or the Hampshire Market was at, where it's destroyed there. So it's just kind of interesting to look at that. Like I said, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of photos. So this is actually taking the picture from the east side of State to the west. So if you see that barn on the backside, so this actually, the house there would be Jamie Herrmann's house now over here on Park Avenue. That barn behind it would be Hartman's barn, which we're going to talk a lot about Hartman's barn as we go through this presentation.
Trevor,
so it's just kind of cool to see that.
Can you flip one ahead?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
Hartmann barn in the back.
So if you look, again, this is a picture taken from the east side of Strait to the west, but that barn up on the top of the picture, that's Hartman's barn, which is now Incredible Builders. That's a picture of the aftermath, and again, I don't know exactly where that was taken. I guess it really doesn't matter, right? So this picture here, again, was taken from the west side of State towards the east. So this is basically at the corner, you're looking at the corner of State and Washington Avenue. So a little story about the 1890 hose cart. Hampshire had an 1890 hose cart. Again, it was stored in the Kai's building, and it wouldn't work on that day because the water pump wasn't working. But the hose cart actually got stolen. And funny story, so in the 40s or 50s, my grandfather, Johnny Herrmann, and Steve Gustafson's dad, Les Gustafson, had a bright idea. They're like, we think we know who stole that. We're going to go break into their barn and get it out of there. So they drove over to Burlington, and again, this is probably in the 40s or 50s, and they broke into the barn. 30s. They broke into the barn, and well, guess what? It wasn't in that barn. That's one of the stories that I remember my grandfather telling. So I wanted to pay. So anyways, with that being said, we obviously never had the 1890 hose cart. So a couple years ago, I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said, you know, we have a 1890 hose cart in our garage in pieces, and we don't know what to do with it. I'm like, I do. I know what to do with it. To restore some of Hampshire's history, we'll take it. So we did. We took it, and Cy Herrmann and his son Terry and Zach, his grandson Zach, they refurbished it. Did an incredible job, but it now sits in the front lawn of Fire Station 2. We actually had a dedication ceremony a couple years ago, but I thought that was really kind of cool to have the same year host cart, and we now are honoring Hampshire, remembering Hampshire from when it was in 1890. So that's a picture of it there at Station 2. So a little bit about after the Great Hampshire Fire of 1929. So they had plans to rebuild, included an ordinance to regulate the work for more fire-safe buildings, and they wanted to appoint a fire marshal to prevent future fires. Now, I never read after the fact that they actually appointed a fire marshal. However, they did establish the fire department. So officially, the fire department was organized in 1931. There were 25 charter members. It was Friday, May the 8th, 1931, and this is right out of the village meeting minutes, which I have a copy. Actually, the copy's right over there, and I'll show you a copy up here on the screen in a minute. The meeting was held, bylaws were read and adopted, and then a representative of Peter Purse Company assisted the organization with organizing the department. So Peter Purse Company is eventually the organization that we bought the Model A from, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But I assume the gentleman from Peter Purse had some fire department background, so Hampshire utilized him to help organize the fire department. So the membership fee back then was $1. Each member had to pay $1 annually. The first fire chief appointed was Ernie Gustafson. The first assistant chief was H.N. Peterson. And then Howard Drymiller was actually appointed as the secretary and the treasurer. And then if we go to the next slide here, so these are all the original charter members from 1931, a lot of very big Hampshire names. Lynn Bird, Ted Irving, Walter Carlson, Julius Mathis, Grant Melms, Seb Dumlin, Clark Melms, Sidney Eichler, Ernie Gustafson, my grandfather, W.H. Click, Herbert Warrington, Frank Herrmann, George Wilcox, Clarence Holtz, Walter Wilkins, Jay Morning, Harry Fairchild, Joseph Fitzpatrick, Fred Peterson, Ron Fredericks, Harry Trayman, Ralph Getzeman, and Walter Voigt. So those are all your original charter members in 1931. And then if we go to the next slide, so these are the village minutes, village meeting minutes that actually have all the wording in there when they established the fire department, and they were going to pursue taking bids to actually purchase the Model A fire truck. And again, there's a copy up there afterwards if you guys want to go over there and look at them. It's kind of cool to look at that and read that. So the village trustees who actually made all this happen back in 31 was the mayor, Frank Channing, and that's a picture of the mayor with his son right there. The trustees were Bay, Drymiller, Glidden, Hartman, Reed, and Sheezer. And then C.H. Click was actually the village clerk, which I assume that's why we have a Click Street. And if you go to the next slide there's actually a picture of C.H. Click. He was the clerk for 50 years, and he was the township supervisor for 55 years. So pretty amazing. And then here's the newspaper articles from the Hampshire Register when they actually organized. So there's just different dates there with different articles. And again, there's a copy of that up on the table if you want to look at that after the fact. With that being said, you want to take a break or keep going?
We can break now.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go ahead and take a break, and we'll come back and continue from there.
Perfect. We're going to take about a 10-minute break, and we're going to have a presenter who came to our last month's meeting and presented. If you want to come up and grab your stuff. This is Miles Johnson. He is a member of the Hampshire Township Historical Society. He is our youngest member and also has an incredible interest in history. Village items particularly. He makes the round all the businesses. Everybody knows him by first name. Quite a character. How I met Miles was I was out in the yard doing some work one day, and Miles rides up on his electric scooter, and we're working in the yard, and I hear, "Hey, how much you want for that bicycle?" And that's how I met Miles. So it was pretty funny. So he's brought with a collection of historical items, both from Hampshire and from abroad. If you would like to show some of the items that you've brought, Miles, take it away, my friend.
So, how we're talking about the Hampshire Fire, here's a newspaper article that Randy Ross let me borrow.
Can you read the date of the newspaper?
This one is from, September 19th, 1979.
It's an anniversary of
Yes.
Okay. That's
show
neat. Yeah. What do you got next?
So I bought this off of Facebook Marketplace. Bill told me to show it. It's from the Great Chicago World Fair.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
That's awesome.
What does it say on there, Miles?
Century
Oh, it
of
says
Progress.
Century of Progress, Chicago World Fair, 1933.
Yeah, I thought that was
Wow.
really neat.
That is real neat. How much you pay for that?
45.
Okay. He's quite a wheeler dealer.
I bought this at the rummage sale they do in town. It's from Ray Maynard Jr. It's a pair of electric scissors.
A pair of electric scissors.
Yeah, it's electric
It's-
scissors. And I thought that was cool.
And that had Ray Maynard's business on the address as an addressee.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
received it. Got it.
I have some antique insulators that me and Bill found by the tracks. And I actually like to donate all of these.
Oh, that's wonderful. He's got quite a collection of insulators. How many different colors of insulators would you say you
There's
have?
this green color, the clear, some brown ones, some blue ones,
How many of you brought home to your mother?
a lot. Here's an original postcard from Borden's from 1912.
Can you read the postmark date on the back of the card?
It says February 2nd, 4 p.m., 1912.
Can you read who it's addressed to?
No.
It's in cursive. It says, Mrs. Lois, it looks like Bay, B-A, or maybe it's Hakey, H-A-K-E. RFD, Elgin, Illinois. No zip code, no street address. Hi, son. Her penmanship's not that good. But you get the idea. Oh, yeah, Borden's plant. That's the picture of the plant along the railroad tracks and the stack that's no longer there.
Yeah.
Where'd you get that?
eBay.
Okay. All right, what else you got?
I got some matchbooks from the businesses. Arrowhead. 2 Arrowhead matchbooks.
Do you know where that was located by chance, Miles? The Arrowhead restaurant was a very popular restaurant out at the truck stop, out at Route 20 and the tollway, and they were there for years.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I have some Ace Hardware matchbooks from Hampshire.
Does it show which name? Is it Myers or Marlowe's?
it's-
Oh, it's Myers. That
both Myers.
That was the. Pardon? Yeah. Yeah. And what's the other one you got?
They're both Ace Hardware
Oh,
from the
okay.
same pot.
Yeah. Oh, where'd you get those?
eBay as well.
Okay. Common theme.
I have some pins from the Great Chicago World Fair. It says, I was there. It's real small. And I've seen the World Champion Log Whirls at the Great World Fair.
Where'd you get those?
When I bought the umbrella, he gave me this stuff. Here's a closing day ticket from the World's Fair. Here's a ring from the World's Fair.
Wow. I haven't seen that yet.
No. And I have what do you call that? Souvenir, it says on there.
Oh, yeah.
I just saw the umbrella and I really like that. And then I don't know if I can really open this. It's pretty big. It's an actual map from 33.
What is it, a map of the
Map of
waterfront
Chicago.
World Fair? Oh, okay. So you'd use this as a guide when you would get there to make your way around the various displays? Oh, wow, it's full color.
Here, I'll take this side.
A Century of Progress, 1883 to 1933. Same thing.
Yeah.
Wow. That is neat, Miles. Yeah, very delicate, very fragile. You'll have to manage this carefully. That is wonderful.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool too.
So in general, what would you say interests you in history, Miles? Why are you interested and find it at your age, these sort of items fascinating and
Oh,
there you go.
yeah. I just find it interesting because antique stuff is really cool.
Can you repeat that?
I find history interesting because all antique stuff is very cool, interesting and cool.
That's good.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else?
Nope, that's it.
How about a round of Thank you, Miles. Thank you for sharing. That is interesting to see someone at your age so interested in history. So, yeah, I think we all share a common interest. So, thank you again. Pack up your goods there. Your treasures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Suitcase to go. Bill and Trevor, the floor is yours. Back to you, gentlemen.
Good job.
Nice job, buddy. Nice job.
Well done, buddy.
So at the beginning, I had said how we wish we'd have wrote some things down as you're listening to your parents and your grandparents. So one of the things that I did learn from that,
Hold on.
it's okay, I can tell this. One of the things that I learned from that, so over the last 15 or 20 years, I have been writing down everything you can imagine from the fire department perspective. Calls with a story, whether it be accidents, fires, change or the cost of equipment, the changes within the organization. So I have 28 volumes at my house of different stories. So I hope someday, and I've actually been working on this a little bit the last couple of years, but I hope someday to put it all into a big story format and then have it published, and so we can have that as part of our history. So that's one of the things that I've been working on. But again, history is very important, and so that's what I've been doing. Like I said, I told stories about listening to my dad and my mom, my grandparents, and I really regret not writing some of that stuff down. So hopefully we can have that for the future.
So on another note, Trevor was the first full-time firefighter in Hampshire, and I was the second firefighter. So we worked together for, I don't know how long, 20-some years, right? So anyways, if you listen to Trevor's side of the story, it doesn't usually match up with my side of the story. So just so we're clear, I'm working on my rebuttal, if you will.
Yeah, Bill's in the book a lot.
I got a whole chapter.
All right, so
Where are we at
continuing
here?
here, Ernie Allen.
Keep going.
No, gotta go back. Go back. So, anybody who lived in a rural area had to basically have an agreement to get fire protection from the fire department. So here's one from Ernie Allen, which is really kind of cool when you read this agreement. So I'm just going to read a little bit of this. So this is actually what it says in the agreement, and it's signed by Chief Gustafson. But these are some of the things that were required of the homeowner to be part of the membership to be protected by the fire district. First of all, you had to give a donation to the Hampshire Community Fire Department. You had to call Central to report a fire on your farm or your neighbor's farm if there was a fire. This is word for word right out of this agreement. Keep all the doors and windows closed to prevent any draft in the event there's a fire in your home. If there is livestock in the building, try to get them out. See that you have ample water on hand at all times. If you have no phone, go to the neighbors who has one. If there are none, kindly consider installing one. Thought that was good. Again, this is right in the agreement. Never go to the neighbor's fire without filling your milk cans first. You may be the means of saving their property. Keep your driveway clear of snow and cars so we have access. And if you follow all these instructions, we will do our best to provide efficient services. So I thought that's kind of cool, but this is actually that agreement from Ernie Allen. What's interesting, if you look at the top here, it says the fire department was actually organized in 1930, but all the records show 1931, so it's kind of interesting. Again, I'll have this on display if anybody wants to look at that. So here's actually the first purchase of the Model A, which we still have the Model A. It's actually stored out at Station 2 now. But there's the purchase contract right there. We still have that on display at Fire Station 1. But there's some of the original charter members from 1931. It's kind of funny. They kind of look like mobsters when you look at them on there. But that's the Model A there, right in front of the fire station, which is now the Village Hall.
Can you bring it up on the screen? Or is it locked up?
No, it's not. That's it.
That's it right there.
Oh, we're looking at,
Oh,
what you call
you're out of-
the
you're out of sync.
station age.
Again, that's a picture of the purchase agreement for the Model A. And again, I said we have that display at Fire Station 1. And then, again, there's the Model A in front of the fire station back in 1931. So if you go to the next one, so the Model A was purchased on February 19th of 31. It was $3,200. And again, we bought that from Peter Persh and Sons in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Actually, it was interesting. They actually took bids back in those days. So they actually did it just like you're supposed to do this day and age, which I find was kind of interesting. So the other bids came in at $3,900, $3,000, and $5,000. They went with the $3,200 from Peter Persh. And then one company was actually late with the bid, so they were disqualified. So an interesting story, and I'm not exactly sure how this happened, but I again remember my dad and my grandfather talking about this. So when the Model A came here, there was no seat in it. And so my grandpa actually put a milk crate in there, drove it to Kenosha, Wisconsin, had the seat put in, and drove it back. Now, my daughter lives in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I hate driving in a car. I can't imagine driving the Model A up there. So I thought that was kind of an interesting story, so I was going to pass that on.
Trevor, your stories are wrong.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Why is it wrong?
because your Chris and Maynard took your grandfather to the Ford plant on Torrance Avenue.
In the...
It was about mid-March, it was freezing rain. And they put an arch crate, and he wore a pair of fire boots, a rubber coat, and goggles, and drove it from Torrance Avenue to Kenosha.
Okay.
He was cold.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that's a cool story. It really is. And I remember him talking about going to fires the same way, where he'd take his rubber coat off. It was rubber coats back then. Throw it on the front to keep it warm, and drive without a coat. So, just some really cool stories. Those were when men were real men, right? So this next picture just blew it up a little bit, but again, there's some of the original charter members again in front of the fire station. And this next one's kind of interesting. So this is, when I was growing up, I always heard my parents and my grandparents talking about Laufer's Corner. I'm like, where is Laufer's Corner? Well, it was the barn at the corner of State and Allen. So if you look there, there's the Model A doing training in 1931. They actually used the barn for training. Now that barn was there until about 1992, 93, because we actually got to use it for training, and then they tore it down right after that. But that milk house there was there for many years after they tore the barn down. Of course, that's also the barn that Jim Root farmed for many years. So kind of a cool picture to see that. Next picture is Ernie Gustafson, the first fire chief. And he was served from, again, originally he was the fire chief and served until 48. Got anything you want to add on that?
No, then him and Herrmann switched to chief and assistant chief.
Okay. Next one is some of the original charter members. You got Fred Peterson, Seb Dumlin, Walter Carlson, and Walter Bowman. And on the right side there, you got Seb Dumlin, Walter Carlson, and that's my grandfather, John. So that dress A cap that my grandfather has on is right there on the table. So I kept that all these years, and it's actually in my basement now. I have a little bit of a museum down there, but a lot of the stuff comes from my basement. But yeah, I still have that as well, and those are his uniform shirts as well, the blue one and the white one on the table there.
Do you still charge the $10 for the tour? It's worth it. It's worth it.
It's just 10 for you.
Price has gone up. Ooh, darn.
So this next one here, a lot of you here will probably remember Ma Hartung or Catherine Hartung. So she owned the little general store, which is the insurance company, and now I think it's a mortgage company just to the south of the village hall, right? So she owned that store. That was her store. And my mom and I were just talking about this the other day, but my mom used to go in there when she was a kid, but it was a general store. She was a diabetic, lost a leg, and she was in a wheelchair, but she actually answered the fire phone, which this is the fire phone, in that store. And then she would blow the fire whistle, and the firemen would come in and get the note of where the fire was at. They'd go to into the fire station, get the apparatus, and go to the fire. But we literally just got our hands on this probably about 5 years ago. Somebody from the family walked into the fire station and gave this with a little explanation of exactly what she did. But I remember all the time my grandfather and my dad talking about Ma Hartung. So she's actually buried in the Hampshire Center Cemetery. So one of the things we do traditionally every year is put a flag on all of our firefighters that are buried in all the township cemeteries. And obviously to remember her, she gets a flag on her grave every year as well. So kind of a neat story. We did actually have a line of duty death. We kind of just really figured this out a couple years ago, and I think Les Peterson was a big part of this story and Bullet. But we never really did anything to remember Frank Stuhlman. He actually died in the line of duty in 1940. He actually fell off the fire truck and then died of complications from falling off of it. So a few years ago, we actually, and it's up on the table here for display, we actually put a little remembrance box with one of the original Hampshire patches, one of the original badges, and then a little bit of a plate there with a little bit of a story of how he died. But that's on display in the main entrance coming into Fire Station 1. And Frank is actually buried in the Catholic cemetery. And there's a picture of firefighter Frank Stuhlman on the fire apparatus in front of the village hall. I just kind of blew it up to get a little bit of a picture of him there. So then in '62, they moved over to Washington Street. A lot of the firefighters did the work. They built this, but there's the apparatus back in '62. There's the Model A, and then pumper number 2 and number 3, and then the blimp, and then a bread truck, and then the ladder truck. And then there are some of the members in '62. You got like Ron Frederick and Wayne Sigmund and Verge Vogel and my father and my grandpa and the Gustafsons, Ralph Bowman. So some of the Ron Nussbaum's in there. So those are some of the guys that were on in '62. And that picture is actually up on the table as well if anybody wants to look at that. And on the front of Station 1, so we completely remodeled the fire station back in 2003. And Les Gustafson Gramps was when they built it back in '62, he helped them out with the loan and loaned them the money to build it because they didn't have a lot of money back in that day. So he actually helped to build it. So in honor of Gramps, we actually put a plaque on the front of the station when we remodeled it in 2003 and dedicated it to him. So that's the picture of the plaque there on the front of the fire station. And then up in Seiler Park, back in 2016, we actually put a monument in with some benches and a bunch of bricks there. And all the bricks closest to the firefighter monument have all the charter members' names on that. So the fire department just paid for all those. We put all the bricks in there with all their names. And then any other firefighter that wanted one had to pay $50, and then they put theirs below the charter member. So if you haven't got a chance to go up there and see that, it's really kind of cool. The firefighter monument's there. A couple of benches that are dedicated to fire service members, as well as a playground for the kids that's actually a fire truck. So really, really kind of cool if you haven't seen that. Steve Gustafson actually gave me this picture, but this is actually the fire of the church at the corner of Washington Avenue and Elm Street. So there's the Model A in front of the, what would be now the 1962 fire station, pumping off of that hydrant. And that fire engine there, the Model A, is actually relaying the pump engine number 2, which is over on Elm Street as they're fighting the fire. And then that's actually Burlington's engine sitting there on Washington Avenue. So obviously the post office is right where that house would be right there. So that's really kind of a cool picture. I don't know, what year was that?
I'm guessing it must have been early 40s, because Burlington's, I think our second engine was 39 and Burlington's was a 37.
Okay.
So I'm guessing it was probably early 40s.
Okay. So yeah, kind of a cool picture. So about 20 years ago or so, it was Palazzolo's Pizza. I went there to do a fire inspection. So I go down in the basement, and there's no ceiling tile in the basement. And here I see all these burnt joists. All the floor joists are burnt. And I was like, oh my God, I wonder if that's from the Great Hampshire Fire. So I went home and talked to my dad, and my dad's like, no, that was actually Sev Dumlin's grocery store, and it burned in 1962. So there's a picture of the floor joist burned in there, and it's still like that today with the neon cow. It's the same floor joist, they're still there. So I went back to the fire station and went up to our records up in the upstairs loft, and I was able to find the original fire report, which this is it right here. But the fire report back then is a lot different than it is now. Now it's about 10 pages long. This is very vague and very to the point. But all the firefighters sign in who was there, what the dollar loss is, how much water they used, and then the generic information of the address and what caused the fire. So this particular fire was actually a furnace fire. They used 5,000 gallons of water, and it was extinguished in about an hour and 15 minutes. And they actually called Burlington to come and assist, because Burlington's chief's name, Chief Vogel, is at the bottom of the report as well. So kind of cool to see this stuff. But we have hundreds and hundreds of these fire reports in our records upstairs. So it's kind of cool just to thumb through them to see all the different fires. You know, we don't think of Hampshire as a town that has a lot of fires, but when you go back and look at all the records, there is a ton of fires. So just kind of cool. So the Hampshire School Nursing Home fire, everybody knows that was on the corner of Warner and Jackson. Originally it was a school, and then it became a nursing home. And then it went, they went out of business, it closed, so it was vacant. So on August 1st of 1978, somebody torched it. It was an arson fire. A lot of us were extremely lucky that we did not lose our dads that night because they had basically booby traps set in there. They had hot plates that were plugged into electric outlets with 1-gallon cans of gasoline on them. And thank God it failed. They didn't do what they were supposed to do, or a lot of us, as like I said, we would have lost our dads that night. I remember it to this day. I was 10 years old. My mom and I actually watched out the front picture window of our house on Elm Street and could see it just as plain as day. It was a massive fire. It was actually a big deal. WGN News actually came out, which for WGN to come out here back in that era was something, but it was all over the WGN News. But that was an arson fire. It was kind of a, probably better should just keep it where it's at, but it was an interesting arson fire that they pretty much knew who probably did it. It was never actually confirmed. But let's just say it was some very interesting history of Hampshire back in that day. So, and then they go to the next page. There's a couple more pictures of it, but there's Hampshire's ladder truck. A firefighter's actually going up to the roof. This is the other side of the building that wasn't severely damaged, but it's interesting. I'd really like to know who that little girl is on that bike that's watching the firefighter climb up the ladder there. And then you can see an aerial view that they took a picture from the top and how bad it was actually damaged. But that was tore down, a little bit after that. We actually held the Hampshire High School bonfires up there after they cleaned all that out. It was just an empty lot, and then eventually they built a bunch of houses there. And I know when they were digging the foundations for some of the houses, some of it was buried there. So they were actually finding bricks and things like that. And as a matter of fact, today, if you drive by there, the stairwell on Jackson Street is still there that you walked up to get to the sidewalk. It's still there, which is really kind of cool.
Paul Fletcher and I were the first two in with a hose that night. We went in there and didn't know until later on, but there was gallons of gas behind us right inside the door and stuff that didn't go off.
Yeah, thank God. Thank God. So this next fire is the Steinbus Wood Products fire. I think it was in '79, right, Howie? You want to talk about this at all, or no?
Huh?
You want to talk about this at all, or?
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah, you were there. So this is the Steinbus Wood Products at the corner of Kaizen Industrial. Now it's an empty lot right across from WS Hampshire there. But it burned to the ground, but you can see the firefighters there in action. I remember I was in 5th grade, and it broke out about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning because I was walking to school, the Hampshire Elementary School, and I was walking down State Street. I remember you could see it. It was huge. Even walking down State Street, we could actually see it. So again, kind of some cool stories as a kid growing up and remembering some of those things. So Herrmann's barn, this is what we had talked about at the original. We saw a picture of Herrmann's barn when the Great Hampshire Fire took place there. But this is Herrmann's barn, which is Incredible Builders. But we have 4 different records of it burning. So the one on the left there is the 1981 fire. It was a stove place, right? It was heavily damaged then in '81. And then on the right there, that's a fire in the Herrmann's barn in the 40s. And if we go to the next page there, I don't know what year, I think this was the 50s. This is when it burned in the 50s. And then the next page, I don't know what year it is, but there's another picture of Herrmann's barn on fire. So like I said, we've got 4 different records at the fire station of Herrmann's barn burning. And I don't know if it burned more than that, but that's quite a history of fires in the Herrmann's barn. Pet Ag, we've had a few fires there over the years, but I believe this was in the 70s based on looking at the helmets. Do you remember this one at all, or any of you guys? Les?
Yeah, the fires, it was up in the
Attic space or the?
back space and stuff like that.
Okay. So yeah, but there's a picture of one of the Pet Ag fires.
They had the old chute that some of the women that worked upstairs come down in the old chute, when they,
Oh, really? Oh, that's kind of, oh, that's pretty crazy.
I think what saved it was Frank Shugard went up there he was a maintenance guy, went up there with a fire hose, crawls up there and putting water on it until the fire department got
there.
So.
Huh. So this next one is Patterson Lumber Company, and this is about 1969, 1970. The reason I know that, I was told by some of the firemen that they just got the International 1408 or pumper number 8 at the time. But this is the building that's still there. We're now Kruger Tax, but it's the long building just to the right of Kruger. So if you go to the next page, there's a picture of the building after the fire. You can see it was heavily damaged. They had a lot of smoke damage there, but that building really looks the same when you drive by it now. They just cleaned it up, right? So it's kind of cool to see that. The next page there, that's the J&L pallet fire of '85. So that's our other ladder truck that's working it right there. Obviously, it was destroyed. I don't know what caused that. Was that they were burning by the pallets?
They burned old broken pallets. And they put it out to the northeast of the building, burning a huge pile. And the wind, big wind blowing the fire right onto the sink.
Yeah. Well, I remember there was a picture in the newspaper in the header. They had a picture of the header from distance of the fire, and it was a massive fire, as you can
The whole
imagine.
inside was stacked with pallets, so the fire really got rolling in there with all the pallets and stuff.
In a matter of minutes.
Ended up, the people had their cars parked and never moved them with the cars and everything else parked that they were there.
So this next one is Shireland. Of course, Shireland closed in the early 90s. It was only open for a couple of years, but it's been closed off, fenced off, but people break in there, and we've had numerous arson fires in there. But this is one of them. This was probably about 2004. So that was one of them there, and then we had one a year later in 2005, and then we just had one literally like 2 years ago. We had another one out there that they torched. So several building fires out there, and there's still quite a few buildings standing out there. It's kind of the history of going out there and walking around. When we had the fire a couple years ago, we just walked around and looked at everything. It's just really kind of cool to see all that stuff. But again, a lot of the buildings are still there. So this is Greavy's barn. This was in 2017. The barn was actually built in the late 1800s. This is at the corner of Burner and Briar Hill Road. This was a Sunday afternoon about 4 o'clock. Just kind of a little funny story about this. There was no animals in there. It was all straw and hay. It was electrical fire. But when we got dispatched at 4 o'clock, I actually went en route, and the dispatcher called me. And now keep in mind, I live on White Oak Street. This fire's out in Briar Hill and Burner. I could see it from my house. So as I back out of drive and start to go, the dispatcher called me and said, the guy's trying to put it out with a garden hose. And I'm like, well, it's probably too late. You probably have him pulled back. But it was kind of interesting. So that's what it looked like when we pulled up. But this was a 2-alarm fire. It's a rural area. We had to bring in water to actually extinguish it. But the barn was destroyed. But really a shame. Again, that was a late 1800s barn. And when you read the story of the original founder or builder of it, which dates back, like I said, the late 1800s, kind of a cool story to read. So I actually came across that article and read that. So this is Phyllis Treadwell's house. This was 2018. This was in June. Again, this is kind of an interesting story too. So this was a Saturday night about 11 o'clock. Phyllis was home. She was brushing her teeth, and she was in the bathroom, and she smelled smoke. So she left the bathroom to investigate, and she found that the fire was in her den or office area, which is on the back side of the house, right by the kitchen. And the stairs going to the second floor was right by that den or office area. So Phyllis grabbed a bucket, and she tried to put it out herself for quite a while before she determined, I have to go call the fire department. So she couldn't find her phone then. So she walked over to the neighbor's house, and again, it's 11 o'clock at night. So by the time she woke her neighbor up, and he called 911, and we got there, and we were there in about 4 minutes. The stairwell to the second floor was completely consumed. It was gone. We actually put the fire out on the first floor real quickly, but fire was on the second floor, got on the walls, it was up in the attic space. So we actually sent, because we couldn't use the stairwell, we sent firefighters up through the second floor window on the front, as you see there. We threw ladders in there, we sent firefighters in. Phyllis, let's just say she had a lot of stuff. So that second floor had a lot of stuff on it, and it got involved in the fire, and we tried to battle it from the second floor for about 15 or 20 minutes. And based on the information, I was actually in command that night, based on the information I got, I was not comfortable with it anymore. So I pulled the firefighters out. We let it burn through the roof, and then we went to a defensive operation where we actually put an aerial master stream over the top of it and put the fire out. Once it consumes the roof, we put the fire out, and the fire was literally out in about 45 minutes. Unfortunately, the house was destroyed, but the bottom line is Phyllis was safe. She didn't have any smoke detectors, so thank goodness, at least they weren't working. Thank goodness she hadn't gone to sleep, because it probably would have been a different outcome, right? So a little bit about that fire. Again, that was in 2018. So W.R. Meadows, we've had several fires there over the years. The unfortunate one we had just a couple years ago, we had an explosion in one of the, it was Building J. So as you guys probably remember, it was all over TV, but the helicopters from the Chicago News were flying over, and they're saying, look at that destruction, look at that destruction. Well, if you look at that wall there, that wall did exactly what it was designed to do. That's an explosion room because of the product they make in there. It's very volatile with the chemicals they use in there. So when it exploded, the wall did what it should have done. It blew out and not in, because if it had blown in, we would have had a lot more injuries or even fatalities. Unfortunately, two workers were in that room, and what had happened is there's not supposed to be any electrical equipment in there. You're never supposed to bring electrical equipment in there. Unfortunately, they did. They were cleaning the top of the tanks, and when they turned the vacuum on, the electricity with the vapors, kaboom, and exploded. Unfortunately, one person died, and the other one was critically injured. I know the dad of the one that was critically injured, and I've stayed in contact with him over the years, and he actually made a full recovery and is back to work. So this is a little bit about that story. And then the one on the right there was the big one in the Pentagon, or the main office building. So this was actually in November of '96. That was a $2 million fire. When we actually arrived, the first floor was fully engulfed in fire, and they had all kinds of pallets and product in there. But how the fire started is they had a wooden dumpster inside the warehouse. And what somebody did is they threw a rag in the wooden dumpster. Well, guess what happened to the rag? It spontaneously combusted. Got the dumpster going, and they have a night watchman out there, but by the time the night watchman found it, the whole first floor was engulfed in flames. When we actually got there, the overhead door that you're looking at was already down. It had already fell in, and fire was blowing out of there. This actually went to 5 alarms. There was probably about 15 fire departments that came in. It took about 3 hours to actually extinguish everything because there was so much product in there. You have to pull it all out and extinguish it. We ended up losing a lot of firefighter gear because of the chemicals. So a lot of the gear had to be replaced by our insurance company, but we did lose a lot of gear that night. But that was a $2 million fire. And then
the product, it was tar. So we're crawling along the floor in tar, you know, so we finally, now the fire's out and everything, we're all standing around, can't bend our legs anymore because it's all, tar's all dry now. We're all tarred over.
Yeah, it was kind of a mess. And then the very next year, in '97, one of the other buildings, the M building, they have dust in there. Well, they had a dust explosion, and that building caught on fire. But when it exploded, a lot of the fire and embers went into all their expansion joints, which are stored in the yard. So it was a massive fire. It was a 2-alarm fire. But the building M was pretty much heavily damaged or destroyed, and then a lot of their product in the yard, which were the expansion joints, that was heavily damaged as well. But that was just a year later, and about the same time. Matter of fact, it was the day before Thanksgiving. So just a little bit about that fire. And then a couple other fires. Actually, this is the same fire. This dates back to the 70s. Les Gustafson, I know, and Bullitt was there. I don't know how he was there, but this was a 70s fire. But this is one of their buildings on the other side of the creek towards the backside of W.R. Meadows. But they used a very volatile product at that time, and they had an explosion and fire there. And they actually did away with that product because it was so volatile. So they eventually did away with that particular product.
That's the fire where Les Peterson and I each had an arm in a sling for shoulders. The 2 of us run the tanker. Yeah, 2 of us, each of us have a hose out.
One of the things I want to say about Meadows, over the last 10 years or so, they have really changed the way they do business out there. Matter of fact, they've put fire alarm and sprinkler systems in almost all their buildings. They've changed their safety issues, all the safety stuff they've done. They've done redid all their electric. They have a lot of different safety procedures. So they've done a really great job out there just cleaning it up to prevent fires. And then the next fire there is the Fensel fire. It was actually February 6th of 2015. I'll tell you this story because I think it's important. I don't talk about this a whole lot, but some of you probably know, but I was the first one there that night. It was one of only 2 fatal fires that we've had in the history of Hampshire, to my knowledge, at least in my 36 years. And looking at the other records, I don't see any other fatal fires. But it was Friday night, a little after 10 o'clock. My daughter had a basketball game, so we just got back from the basketball game, and I had to take my son to a sleepover. And when I got done with that, a friend of mine was having his birthday party down at the Corkshire. So I walked into the Corkshire, and I wasn't even there for 3 minutes. I sat down, but my back was at the window. My back was at the window, so I really didn't see what was going on. Somebody at the other end of the table said, "Hey, Trevor, look at all that smoke." So I turned around and looked out the window, and there was a lot of smoke. However, John Fensel had an oil burner over on the Jefferson Street service number 2. So it wasn't unusual to see a lot of smoke over there. But I thought to myself, well, that's an awful lot of smoke. I better go investigate. So I walk out, and as soon as I walk out the door of Corkshire, I can smell it's wood. I'm like, well, okay, that's not an oil burner. I couldn't see the building, so I started walking down the sidewalk, and I noticed there was a car just sitting in the middle of the intersection, just sitting there. I'm like, well, that's odd. They're watching something. So as I continued to walk and get closer to the intersection, I could actually now hear crackling, so I knew there was a fire. When I got to the end of the sidewalk and I could see the building, fire was already blowing out of the second floor window. The people in the car hollered to me they had already called 911. So I looked over there, and I knew the occupant very well. I was played on the softball team for Corkshire, so we'd always go up there and see her at the bar after the fact to pay our dues to Corkshire for sponsoring us. So I look over and her car was underneath the canopy, so I knew she was probably in there. So I ran over to the door, and the door was locked. So I busted out the window on the top, but I couldn't get my hand down to reach the lock to open it. By that time, one of the Hampshire police officers, Roy Mackey, was right behind me. So he started kicking the panel at the bottom of the door. And after about 4 or 5 kicks, it broke in, so I was able to reach up and unlock the door. Unfortunately, when he kicked that panel in, it laid like this, so it got stuck between the bottom step going up to the apartment and the door. There was only about that much room. So I was able to squeeze in there, get the panel out, and then Roy and I went to the top of the stairs where I could hear the fire roaring. And visibility was 0. Roy had his flashlight with him. I hollered out, "Is anybody in here?" And I heard a very, very faint muffle. That's all I heard. So I told Roy, "Stay here. You got to keep calling my name. I'm going to see if I can find her." So he stayed at the top of the stairs, just constantly calling my name. So I got on my belly, and I crawled down the hallway about 20 feet down the hallway, and I found her in the dining room. And I started to bring her back, and I got about halfway back, and I was out of air. I couldn't breathe anymore. So I went to the stairwell, and I stuck my head down in the stairwell, got some air, and then I went back and got her and finished her off to the top of the stairs. And by that time, the fire department was there. And I'll keep in mind, this all happened literally in about 4 minutes' time. The fire department was there, so I went down. They ended up bringing her down. Unfortunately, she was in cardiac arrest, so we did CPR on her, and we got her back. This was on a Friday night, and unfortunately, because of her injury, she passed away on Tuesday. But there was no working smoke detectors. The smoke detectors were there, but there was no batteries in them. And the fire was actually electrical. It started up in that living area by the TV, and she was on the couch. But she passed because of her injuries. But again, it's one of the things that we pass on to people for an educational standpoint, that you got to check those smoke detectors, make sure they're there, make sure they're working, change those batteries, make sure they're in the right place, because that is truly the difference between life and death. So like I said, I don't tell that story very often, but I think it's important that you hear that story. I ended up in the hospital for a day, and then another Hampshire firefighter ended up in the hospital for a day for the night as well. So just a little bit about that story.
And just, I'm going to add this. So for his actions, he was given the State of Illinois Medal of Honor, correct? Or Medal of Valor?
Honor. Yeah.
Honor. So that's a very high award for his actions.
It's the top award in the state.
Yep.
So the next one here is the Briar Glen townhome fire, which was just a couple years ago. As you know, there's a lot of townhomes being built behind the cemetery there. Matter of fact, I think there's 24 buildings now up there, just townhomes behind the cemetery. So this is about 3 o'clock in the morning. We got dispatched for a structure fire. So as we're en route, we're getting all kinds of information from the dispatch center that they're now getting multiple calls. It's a very large fire. When we actually got downtown Hampshire, right about the creek here, we could see the fire. So we knew it was massive. So when we arrived on the scene, it was a 7-unit townhome building under construction. 4 units were already fully engulfed in fire. There were 3 500-pound propane tanks adjacent to the fire, and 2 other buildings next to it, adjacent to that building, the fire building, that were being built on top of the fact that they have piles and piles of lumber that they were using for the construction. So when our first engine arrived, really did an incredible job. We pulled 3 large diameter hose lines and got our aerial master stream, our aerial ladder truck up. We actually contained that fire to the 4 units that were engulfed in flames when we got there. Saved the other 3 units, but our guys just did an incredible job. They took a beating that night. The embers and the radiant heat coming off of that was absolutely incredible. As you can imagine, it's kind of like a lumberyard fire. But just did an incredible job. They actually went to a 1-alarm fire. There was about 10 departments came in, but we only ended up using 5 because the fire was under control in less than an hour. So they investigated, that fire, I said, came in at 3 in the morning. They started the investigation about 10 in the morning, and they were working on it until 3 in the afternoon, and they could not determine exactly what caused that fire. They had an idea what it was. But just recently, in the last month or so, I've been given information that they are suspecting that it was an arson fire based on some information they got. But that was a $1 million fire loss there. They ended up tearing the whole building down. Just due to the fact that it was easy for them because it was under construction. So, yeah, but that was a pretty massive fire. And there's some more pictures of it. So there on the left there, you see our ladder truck working. We got a ground monitor going there at the bottom. You can see some of those propane tanks there to the right. And there's the original picture when we pulled up. That was actually taken right when we pulled up. We hadn't even put lines in place, but that was the 4 units on the end fully engulfed in fire. This is the Primos Lane fire from 2024. So this is out off of by I-90 and Harmony Road. So this is a 3-car garage. He was doing some work on his car, and he had racing fuel in there, but there was an explosion. The garage was fully engulfed. The fire actually extended into the house. Station 2 was already out, so Station 1 was the first one in. They were there in less than 6 minutes. We had 3 lines in operation in the garage and another line interior in the house, so we actually kept the fire to a relatively small area of the house on the 2nd floor and in the chimney there. But that fire was actually brought under control in about 45 minutes as well. But again, it was contained to the garage. But a large fire loss because he had a lot of stuff in his garage, vehicles and so forth and so on. But again, our firefighters just did a tremendous job on that fire as well. And with that being said, that is the end of the presentation. So it credits, again, the late Mayor William Schmidt. Again, that newspaper article that you had is where I took a lot of that information from. We actually have that on display at Station 1 when you walk into the main entrance there. Kind of a really cool article. He did such a great job of putting all that history together. And then again, Dan Gustafson, who was also a writer for the Hampshire Register, he had a really nice article, and I took a lot of that information from him. And then, like I said, when we did the 85th anniversary book, Jeannie Mackey actually sat down with Mayor Peterson, got a lot of information from him, as well as my grandfather. And then Gene Carlson, Walter Carlson. Gene Carlson's still alive. He actually sent us some pictures and information that we used in the presentation tonight. And like I said, Walter Carlson, which is Gene's father, he was also a Hampshire fire chief. And then Herbert Drymiller actually sent the Historical Society some pictures that I used in the presentation tonight. So credit to all those people as well. Any questions on anything?
You did a fantastic job.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed.
So I just want to mention one thing. A lot of times we get asked, what's the worst thing that you've ever been to or seen or whatever. And I don't really like talking about those things, but I'm going to tell you a call that are one of the harder ones, but it had a great outcome. So we went to a call for a 17-year-old female attempt suicide. So we get there, and I'm talking to her, and long story short, she's explaining to me that her parents threw her out of the house. She was pregnant. They're very religious. She doesn't have anywhere to go. She doesn't know what she's going to do. So I spent a lot of time talking to her and got to know her a little bit. And on the way into the hospital, I kind of gave her some guidance on what things that people will help you. There's things that are out there to help you with this problem. You're not all alone. So we went to the hospital, and that's the thing about going on an ambulance call. You drop the patient off, and you never get to talk to him again. Anyways, fast forward 10 years, she comes to the station with her 10-year-old son. Made me feel great.
Yeah, very cool.
Any other questions, anyone? Well, thank you again for your program and your preparation. Appreciate all your service, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Wonderful program. Thank
We
you.
appreciate you having us.
With that, thank you all for coming. Feel free to linger and socialize and put your name in the cardboard box over there for a bottle of Fireball. Thank you again for coming. Next month's program, we have one in April. The centennial celebration. Yes, next month.
Thanks.
So please come. Love to see you again. Thank you again, everyone. Appreciate it.